How's it going? I'm Martin, welcome back to my channel. Today we're looking at 5 books that I would highly recommend to broaden your worldview. That is to say, to broaden your understanding of civilization, the world around you, perhaps most importantly, yourself. So let's dive into it. The first book I'd recommend is Propaganda by Edward Bernays. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew, so he certainly had an understanding of psychology, and he is considered the father of propaganda. Now, propaganda in his terms has to do with simply, what would you say, arguing for the point of view that you should like to see, essentially presenting your narrative to the world. And it's all about how public perception and discourse is shaped by corporations, governments, intelligence agencies, etc., and also how it's done. And this is something that's very useful to know is happening, and it's happening in insidious ways. A good current example would be the collusion between tech companies and government to suppress certain information that was related to COVID and the COVID vaccine, which was shown sort of later to have been, real, what would you say, actual facts, but it didn't align with the motivations or the narrative that was the one that the United States government wanted to present. It's just a very important thing to remember that there are always different groups that are trying to angle for their own narratives that will serve the purposes that they would like to see in the world. The second book I'd recommend reading is The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. I'm sure you heard of this guy. This is probably the most renowned political philosophy book. It's very short and it's a very interesting read. It's all about how to accumulate power and how to go about doing that. It's completely amoral, horrible in many ways. The reason I think it's important to read this book is that there are certainly people that are employing these principles to accumulate power, whether that be in politics, business, or what have you. The benefit of reading this book is to get a visceral feeling of what these things look like, and then hopefully becoming less naive and understanding that there are people that will employ these things, these principles, and you might be able to guard yourself a little bit better when you have this knowledge. The third book I recommend is Dreams, Memories and Reflections by Carl Jung. It's an autobiography, and it's written by the Swiss psychoanalyst and psychiatrist Carl Jung. He is the most interesting person that I've ever read in terms of non-fiction, and I think his ideas opens a new world, and I think that his autobiography is the best place to discover those ideas, because there's so much to look at and to try and understand, and this sort of gives a good or just a collection of a number of different things. It includes his sort of system of psychology, his thoughts on death, what may happen after death, etc., and much more. I have learned, I feel like, so much from Jung. I think he has the most elaborate system of understanding man that I've come across, and his ideas also opens a new dimension of understanding art, literature, and mythology, religion. And so I highly recommend you check out this book as well. The fourth book I recommend you give a read is Civilizations and its Discontents by Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Incredibly interesting read. At the end of his life, he spent considerable time writing about sociology and religion, and in this book he fundamentally looks at how man is ill-adapted to live in civilized society. That is to say, we have all these instinctual drives that we cannot fulfill because we live in a civil society. That is to say, you cannot have sex whenever you want, you cannot steal from someone else, because that leads to it's not a well-functioning society, let's say. But at the same time, thank God it's like this, because the next time you were to meet a person that's physically stronger than you would be in a lot of trouble. But nonetheless, this leads to a lot of, leads to some mental issues, essentially, psychological issues, because we have these desires and these needs that we need to repress, and this causes disturbances. And he sort of says that there is this constant battle between the collective and the individual, where you're sort of, the collective wants you to behave in this way and you would like to behave in that way, and you need to find some sort of compromise, and that causes disturbances, essentially. There's lots more to the book, but it's an incredibly interesting read, and I highly recommend that you check this out. The last book I recommend you read is The Sacred and the Profane by Mircea Eliade, the Romanian scholar. This is such an interesting book, and it explores what Jung might call the religious function. That's this innate function or instinct that we all carry with us, and it's this ability to be able to experience what many people regard as divine, mystical, or religious. We know that we can achieve these states through meditation, trance, ingestion of entheogens, psychedelics. And so this book is trying to relate how these sacred areas of our life is still important to this day. Even though we live in a very secular society, we can still essentially connect to these aspects of ourselves, and is trying to trying to explain why that's still important. And that's why I think this is such an interesting and eye-opening book to read. So definitely check this one out. So there you have it. Those are the 5 books I recommend you read to broaden your perspective and horizon on life. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know down below. Leave a comment, a like, etc. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And let me know which book you think I omitted from the list, because I'd love to broaden my own worldview. And thanks again for watching.